It is beyond time that we stop tolerating empty words and political rhetoric that ignores the real, lived experiences of those who are directly impacted by government policies. The recent conversation surrounding benefit reforms for sick and disabled people has laid bare the contemptuous disregard with which certain factions of the political establishment approach the vulnerable. And what's worse, it's being done with a smirk of condescension, as though the suffering of thousands is an inconvenient detail, easily swept aside by hollow apologies and false assurances. Sarah Owen's testimony in Parliament, reading aloud the raw, desperate messages from disabled constituents, is a moment that should shake any reasonable person to their core. These individuals are not abstractions or political statistics to be manipulated in budget forecasts. They are human beings, struggling to make ends meet, terrified that the support they rely on will be ripped away from them. They are terrified that a system designed to protect them is now a tool to further punish them. The government's proposed reforms to disability benefits, touted as an effort to encourage self-sufficiency, are nothing more than a cruel charade aimed at demonizing the most vulnerable in society under the guise of efficiency. Consider the stories Owen shared. One person, reduced to living on just £700 for the month, anxiously anticipates losing their support. Another is racked with panic, feeling let down by a government that should have had their back. And a third simply said, "I feel so sick, physically sick." The question that must be asked is this: how far does the government intend to push before it recognizes the inhumanity of its actions? These are not the words of people seeking a handout. They are the words of citizens who fear their survival is under threat. When Keir Starmer was pressed on the issue, he uttered the same tired phrases, insisting that the government would continue to support those who do need protection. How can this be taken seriously when the very reforms being discussed have been proven to have catastrophic consequences for the most vulnerable? According to the government's own impact assessments, as many as 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, could be plunged into poverty. Let that sink in. These are not hypothetical statistics. These are real lives at risk. And yet, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak seems more interested in defending the indefensible than addressing the suffering this policy will bring. One would hope that, at the very least, Starmer would stand up to the Prime Minister with the same conviction and determination that the Labour Party used to be known for. But, in this instance, his response was meek and detached, as though we were discussing nothing more than an abstract policy debate rather than the lives of individuals caught in the crossfire of a disastrous policy. It is not enough to simply speak of reducing child poverty when your actions in the very same breath threaten to exacerbate it. If Starmer and his Labour colleagues want to be taken seriously as the alternative government, they need to show the courage to reject these cuts outright, to condemn them as morally indefensible, and to fight tooth and nail to ensure that those most in need are not left to suffer. The Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, has also come under scrutiny, with the Prime Minister questioning its analysis of the reform's impacts on people's behaviour. This, too, reveals a fundamental flaw in the government's approach. The suggestion that people receiving disability benefits can simply change their behaviour as a result of these reforms is not only insulting, it's entirely divorced from reality. Disability is not something that can be shrugged off or managed with a change in mindset. To suggest otherwise is not just disingenuous, it's a direct attack on the dignity of people who have to navigate a system stacked against them. It is essential to remember that policies impacting disabled people should be designed with one fundamental principle in mind: dignity. What the government has done here, however, is strip away any sense of dignity, replacing it with fear and uncertainty. The language used by government ministers, comparing benefits to pocket money, only reinforces this dehumanization. These comments are not just careless. They are deliberate attempts to undermine the very notion of social security, turning it into a punchline rather than a safeguard. The Prime Minister, instead of condemning such rhetoric, simply plays the role of apologist, stating that occasionally people don't get it quite right. This is the level of responsibility that the British public is expected to accept? Language matters. It matters when the government tells its citizens they are a drain on society. It matters when politicians reduce the life-altering consequences of welfare cuts to a mere afterthought, as if it's just part of the tough choices that must be made. For those living on the margins, these words are not abstract. They are cruel, callous, and dangerous. If this is the path the government insists on taking, we must be clear about one thing: the fight is not over. The next general election will be an opportunity for the British public to deliver a resounding verdict on the government's disregard for the most vulnerable. The question is not whether the reforms will be implemented. The question is whether the people will allow it. And if the Labour Party does not find its backbone in this moment, it may very well lose the opportunity to stand as the voice of the marginalised. If that happens, we all lose. We cannot afford to stand by and watch as people are pushed into poverty under the pretext of austerity. The government's agenda is clear. They wish to balance the budget on the backs of those least able to bear it. This is not merely a political disagreement. It is a moral failing. And it is time for us to demand better.